This is what I love about interviewing a jazz artist. I always tap my feet and click my fingers, and Don Laka is no exception. He's a legendary kwaai jazz artist who's made significant contributions to the South African music landscape. As we celebrate 30 years of democracy, it is important to recognize and honor his influence and impact on the music industry. Don Laka's innovative blend of jazz, kwaito and traditional South African rhythms has earned him a reputation as a pioneering artist whose work transcends genre boundaries. Throughout his career, Don Laka has not only created music but has also mentored and collaborated with numerous emerging musicians, contributing to the growth and development of the industry. Don Laka, the legend, joins us now in studio to reflect on his years in the industry. Don, very good morning. It's always a pleasure having you join us on Morning Live.
No, thanks once again for having me.
Good stuff, man. You know, some people who don't necessarily understand music say that jazz music is only reserved for Sundays or on a public holiday, and you can only enjoy jazz music on Sundays. No, that is not the case.
No.
Jazz music can be enjoyed any time of the day. And just listening to this beat right now, I mean, I'm in my feels. It takes you down a path that no one has ever taken you to. Because jazz music, you can play jazz music at 1 a.m. on a Monday, on a Wednesday, and still enjoy it. It's an absolute mood booster. So what ignited your passion in music?
Well, I grew up in Mamelodi, and when I was growing up, jazz was played every day.
Yeah.
Monday to Monday, every day. So that's the music that I grew up listening to.
Surrounded by the likes of Keith Moketsi and them.
You know, at the time, I mean, more especially coming from Mamelodi with Philip Tabani not living far from where I lived, it was like, something that you soak in when you grow up.
Yeah.
So it became a natural thing to me.
Right. So what inspires that beat? I mean, whenever you create a beat, do you have a particular incident or event or people in mind?
You know, this is a strange thing. You know, when the song was playing Mamelodi, the album actually was composed in the 80s. And released in the 90s.
Oh, really?
You know, I had the music that time, and we had the problem in South Africa that type of music would not work because companies were not really recording jazz at that time. Most of them. So when a program that was started by SABC called Midday Breeze came up, then I composed a tune which was a signature tune called Destiny on it, and then I put the whole album out, and it became one of the biggest jazz records in the country now. I mean, selling over 500,000 plus.
Yeah. And early years you worked with other legends such as Sipho Gumede, Khaya Mahlangu, Ray Phiri, with whom you performed at the Sakile group, right? And you also co-wrote Brenda Fassie's songs. Let's talk about the importance of friendship and collaboration in terms of just maintaining your space in the local music industry and just about creating more beats.
Yeah, I think the longevity, that's the one that actually I been in the industry for such a long time. It had to cross paths with most of the musicians that became even big names in the country, as you mentioned. Brenda, producing Brenda, Juluka, some stage, Johnny Clegg, and Mango Groove, and many other artists, in the industry. And from 1994, obviously, a lot of people knows the Kalawa story. Now, as I'd say, we started Kalawa because of the dawn of the new democracy. And we found even much more freedom now to do things that we couldn't have done before. I think that freedom brought out the new change of music in the country. And out of that, then was born the kwaai jazz story.
Yeah, and speaking of kwaai jazz, I think you are by far the only musical jazz legend who has created it or who's known for kwaai jazz. What inspired you to create kwaai jazz? And do you think it has resonated with a wider focus of people, especially those who are connoisseurs of jazz music?
The aim was to bring the young people into jazz and make sure that jazz is not a scary word. Jazz becomes a hip word, and when I say kwaai, I mean it's a hip jazz, where, I would mix all types of music. And fortunately, the nice thing is that growing up in this country, with the music that I grew up listening to, Marabi, Kwela music, and, the old musicians that came before me. So it was easy for me to put that in a melting pot, what's called kwaai jazz today. And I must say that when that album was released, Destiny, the first time, there was no jazz records recorded in this country for many, many years. And it became such a huge record that started the whole that brought back the craze of jazz back into the country. And the first festival that was held in Mamelodi at Moretele Park, which was myself, Hugh Masekela, and Sibongile Khumalo, drew over 30,000 people.
Yeah. And did you intentionally create this blend of music called kwaai jazz? And did you anticipate that it would become so popular? Were you just playing around genres, or you just knew that this is it?
No, there was no anticipation that it was going to be big. It's just the music that I loved. By the way, actually, when the album was released, it was rejected by a few companies. Then I decided to release it as a license deal with Sony. So, and the rest is history.
Wow, wow. And last year you celebrated 50 years of your music industry, or was it the year before, right?
Yeah.
50 years of, 52 years this year of your musical journey. What are some of the highlights and the challenges that you've treasured for the past 52 years?
Well, the highlight for me was the Grammy nomination of 2013 for producing Hugh Masekela's album, Jabulani. I think that was the greatest highlight of the career. But there were many of them, actually, as most of my albums reached quadruple platinum, double platinums, gold and stuff. And I continue to release music today, internationally. I know people saying, you haven't released anything. I continue to release. I released about 3-4 albums from last year to this year only. And by the way, I'm working on a new album which will be released in August this year.
Give us a hint. Let's talk about that.
It's about kwaila music, and a mixture of what's happening today, So I've mixed the genres of real South African jazz, Arabian and kwaila in the style,
So you will continue with the style of blending musical influences?
Indeed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to inspiring younger generations of musicians, what are you looking out for? Do you look for a new sound, or you maintain the same sound but different lyrics, different messaging?
I like uniqueness. And I don't listen to much radio because I don't want to be influenced by what's happening. I like to influence what should happen. So that's why, anyone who does things differently, it's the type of person that I'm looking at.
Are you also open to fusing the new generation of musical genres into the classical jazz music that we know of?
Talking about it in classical music, classical jazz, I just I'm more into now writing for orchestras. And in September this year, one of my big compositions will be premiered in Costa Rica by one of the top American and Costa Rican conductor, and it's called In the Land of Madiba. Unfortunately, this is the work that's supposed to be premiered in South Africa, but people overseas, when they heard and when I sent the scores, responded quickly. As I say, it's unfortunate that it won't be premiered here in South Africa, which is a huge orchestral work that I've written. I'm very excited about that. So I'm dabbling into writing for big orchestra. And
I think it's a challenge for you to start looking into the local version of South African classic music or orchestras. Because I've been speaking to Bongani Tembe of the Johannesburg Philharmonic Orchestra, who's saying that he's now setting up or assembling a team of young orchestra or classic artists, and they'll be performing at the Carnegie Square, which is a prestigious venue, in London. So, so I think it'll be noble of you to just gather all the local classic legends and just come up with something outstanding. Indeed,
and I'd like to say Bongani gave me a chance actually for premiering one of my works called like the Moon, we shall rise again, which it's a huge orchestral work that I wrote for 75-piece orchestra plus choir. So I'm into that space now, but mixing that with jazz and and South African music.
And you've been able to transcend to other musical genres, and your music has transcended different age groups. I mean, my father and I are jazz connoisseurs, but just looking at the age gap between me and my father, but we enjoy the same music, we enjoy listening to the same artist. So what does that do to you in terms of making sure that you maintain the same flavor of music that transcends different genres and different age groups?
I'm glad to hear that, because the aim of kwaai jazz was to unite the young and the old, to show that, you know, as I say, for me, I think I'm one of those musicians that has removed the scare out of jazz.
Yes,
and people,
you have.
And I've noticed actually, you know, a lot of females out there would say jazz is it's too scary, you know, there's a lot of things going on. And when they hear my music, you know, they actually start to refer back to stuff that, you know, it's meaningful to them, because there's many genres of jazz that one can enjoy. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on coming up or creating a fusion of jazz music and new models or new genres of music? Say, for instance, jazz music and house music, jazz and amapiano, jazz and so on. Because some jazz musicians are of the view that they don't want to dilute the goodness of jazz music. It needs to be as raw and pure as it is.
Well, you know, for me, I always say culture always, you know, adapts. You know, and I will always adapt. I mean, I've worked with Black Coffee, I've worked with Maporis, I've worked with MT, I've worked with all the young musicians, and I'll continue doing so, because I like to enhance the music that we do and the music that they do. So I think that there's that synergy in all types of music. And if you look at people like Miles Davis, he mixed all types of music, and he recorded all types of music, and those are the people that I really look up to. I mean, Quincy Jones, Miles Davis, and, you know, Herbie Hancock, and those are the guys for me who has taken jazz to different boundaries, you know, and this was started a long time ago by Dizzy Gillespie, by including Brazilian music into his music, and, you know, Spanish music. Now we've got Japanese jazz, we've got European jazz, and you've got Afro jazz. And so I'm one of those people who like to expand the culture of jazz.
Yeah, I know this is a very unfair question to ask, but which song to date, 52 years later, that you would feel you're still jamming to it yourself, and it's closer to your heart?
It is an unfair question. But, you know, I always say, you know, I once read a quote by George Benson. He says, if he stopped playing Breeze, his song Breeze, what is it? And it will mean that the audience that made him popular will get tired of him. So I cannot, well, the real kwaai jazz song that started it all for me was Destiny and Mamelodi. And if I stop playing those, this means, you know, I'm saying to all the people that followed me, now you can also rest. So I cannot stop playing those tunes. So do I call them my favorite? I don't know. They started it all for me as a jazz musician. It is an unfair question.
It is unfair,
I've recorded albums that, one of the albums that I hold dearly to my heart is the only jazz trio, a piano trio that I've done. It was released in Europe only, and the other album called Afro Chopin, which was released in the UK also. So I've got albums that I've done that have been released internationally that have never been released locally.
Right. Don, lovely chatting to you, man. It's always a pleasure having you join us on Morning Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we wish you more years and more hits.
Thank you.
Great stuff.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Wow, I'm getting goosebumps. And that was the legendary Don Laka talking to us about the journey in the music industry. He's also a co-founder of the most reputable record music stable, Kalawa Jazz Me, that breeded soundtracks to the early 90s.